Hello, it's Jo here from Shalem Health Retreat. Today we're going to be making a delicious savoury meal called Tasty Tofu Balls with homemade tomato sauce. And when I first became plant-based about 20 years ago now, this was one of the first recipes I made, and I'd never really cooked with tofu before, but I found it to be a very simple recipe and a very delicious recipe. So if you've never cooked with tofu, don't worry, this is your opportunity to try. I hope you do go away and make this recipe, and I'm sure you'll find it just as delicious as I do. And I still enjoy this today, this recipe. It's so yum. All right, so what we want to do is we want to firstly crumble up our tofu, which I've already done. Now, we need to use firm tofu for this recipe. If you use silken tofu, which is very mushy, it won't form into balls. So what you can do, I've just blended this up in the Thermomix on a few seconds, or just pop it in a food processor. You can even just mash it up with your hands or with a fork. It's very easy to crumble. So we've got 500 grams of tofu. Now make sure you use organic. Soybean, which tofu is made from, the soybeans, are one of those crops that they're genetically modifying. So we want to make sure we're not using regular tofu, where possible, buy organic tofu. So 500 grams of organic tofu. It comes in a block. You can find it at the supermarket, very easy to purchase. So that's just going to go into our bowl. Now, the next thing we want is 2 cups of homemade breadcrumbs. Now, I've just used any whole grain bread, wholemeal bread that I've just blended up in the Thermomix. You can make your own bread and use breadcrumbs from that. But yeah, just make sure that it is whole grain. Don't use white bread because that's been stripped of all the fibre and all the nutrients. A whole grain bread is best. I tend to just get one from the local supermarket. Make sure you look at the ingredients and get the one with the highest percentage of wholemeal wheat flour. And then you'll know you'll be getting as much whole grain as possible. You could go to Baker's Delight and get their whole grain bread. But yeah, just read your labels and make sure that the bread that you're buying has the most amount of whole grain wheat flour possible. All right, so we're going to pop that in there. That's 2 cups of the flour, and that equates to about 3 or 4 slices of wholemeal bread. Next, we want an onion, which I've just chopped up in the Thermomix, and some walnuts are going to give this a lovely crunch. And it's really interesting because when I've served this dish, and friends of mine who make this and they serve it to their friends who like their meatballs, they actually think that this dish is meat because of the texture of the tofu and the chopped up walnuts. Gives it that sort of gristly texture. So yeah, I would definitely experiment with this on your friends and see if they can tell whether it's meat or what it is. I'm sure they'll like it either way. All right, so we just want a cup of roughly chopped up walnuts. And next we're going to add our flavourings. Now, tofu is, the beauty of tofu, it doesn't actually have a flavour as such. And so what you can do is you can make it whatever flavour you like. And today we're going to be using onion powder, garlic powder, mixed herbs and some Celtic salt. But you can play around with the flavours. You can add some paprika, some thyme, whatever herbs you like, fresh herbs even. Yeah, just have a play around with it and see what works best for you and for your family. So that's just going to be put in there, all of our flavourings. And I don't want to waste any. So let me get that last bit of onion powder and garlic powder out. Now, just on that onion and garlic powder, I just wanted to share with you where I get these from. There's a company online called Gourmet Organic, and they do, I can tell you now, the most amazing garlic powder and onion powder. It is pure, no additives, no preservatives. They've simply dehydrated the onion and the garlic and then ground it up finely into a powder. And I can tell you the smell is amazing and the taste is even better. I have people, when I use these products, this garlic powder and onion powder, they say this food is so delicious. And I attribute it to, in large part, the amazing flavour of the garlic powder and onion powder. And you can just tell the difference from those that you buy just off the shelf in the supermarket. A huge difference in flavour. So I would encourage you, look them up, Gourmet Organic, for garlic powder and onion powder. They sell lots of other things too, but that's what I get from them. And with the salt, I buy my Celtic salt from Honest to Goodness. So I would definitely recommend you going onto their website, Honest to Goodness, if you're in Australia. They are an online store that has a lot of natural products, a lot of organic products. So I would definitely recommend them for your basic pantry needs. Okay, so what we want to do now is we're going to mix all of this up and we're going to form them into balls, and then they go into the oven for about 30 to 40 minutes on 180 degrees. And what you'll find is these are very good. This recipe is very good for forming into balls. You know, sometimes you'll find recipes and when you go to make it into that ball shape, it just falls apart. Not so with this recipe, I can guarantee it. Now, I know some people are a little bit concerned about soy products because of the estrogen content, but what I would say is that the estrogen in soy is very, very extremely mild and weak, and it is, in fact, it's 1/100,000, if you know your fractions, the strength of our own body's estrogen. So it's incredibly weak. So for those of you who are concerned about getting too much estrogen in your diet, I would encourage you to do your own research and look up what the scientific literature says about soy, and definitely include it as part of your diet. In fact, in Japan, there is no such phrase as hot flushes. And that's because the women over there have a lot of soy in their diet, whether it be tofu or other soy products, edamame, which are green soybeans cooked up and just thrown into salads. So yeah, I would definitely encourage you to rethink about soy. If you've had a bit of a worry about it, a bit of a concern, I would definitely look at including it in your diet because it has so many amazing benefits. It's very high in protein, plant proteins, and it has that phytoestrogen, which is really going to help bind the estrogen to the cells so that the body's own estrogen can't get in. So these plant estrogens, which are very, very weak in their strength, actually help us with our body's own estrogen. All right, can you see how easy that is to make up into balls and how easy that was to make? You know, it's a very, very simple recipe. So I'm not going to finish that off. I'll do that later. But what I do want to show you is the completed product after it's been into the oven for 30 to 40 minutes. There we have our cooked tofu balls. And now I've already gone ahead and made the tomato sauce. And you'll find the recipe for that in the description below this video. So go and check that out. Have a look. It's a very, very simple tomato sauce. I've actually made it in the Thermomix, but you don't need to have a Thermomix. You can make this sauce on the stove and just let it simmer away. And then you can either serve it chunky or you could blend it with a stick mixer and serve it all blended up, which is what I've done. Blended it up in the Thermomix. So I'm just going to pour that over the balls. Look at that colour, and I can tell you that the smell is amazing. So we're just going to pour all that over. Don't worry that it looks too much because the tofu balls are going to soak all that up, and that is just going to be a delicious meal. Now we want to pop this back into the oven so that all those flavours can just soak in and it can brown nicely on top. And then once we've got it out of the oven, we'll just garnish it with a bit of chopped up parsley. But I'll show you the finished product. So our tasty tofu balls in their homemade tomato sauce has just come out the oven, and I'm just garnishing it with a little bit of chopped up parsley. Now I would serve this with pasta, whole grain pasta, or brown rice would be another delicious option, or my personal favourite, mashed potato. So yeah, experiment and see how you would like to serve this dish. It's a very versatile recipe because this tomato sauce, you can use it just as you would any tomato sauce. Just put it in a bottle. It's a very, very healthy option. It doesn't have the refined sugars like a lot of tomato sauce does. It's sweetened with dates. So yeah, go ahead and make this tomato sauce because it's very healthy, very versatile. You can use it in a lot of different ways. With the tofu balls, you can use those in wraps, sandwiches. You could just even have them on their own. They're very delicious, very versatile. So I would encourage you to experiment with this recipe with the tasty tofu balls and the homemade tomato sauce.